Hello and welcome to Proper Tea. Just a little bit late because I got myself a mug of proper tea. So thank you very much for joining us today. So I just thought I'd just run through a little bit around what we're up to here. We're obviously trying to create our first episode within the series of podcasts which are coming up this year, where I'm interviewing some of our industry's finest celebrities, the people who we all look up to and read. Sometimes they don't know that we know who they are, we know what they're about, because we obviously read with interest at what they are putting out there. So today, on our first show, we have, in my opinion, one of the best economists in the residential property industry, which is a perfect way to launch this podcast season. So obviously, when we're producing this, we're going to be providing you with information on what's happening within the marketplace. So we have to put in a little disclaimer, you know how it is. So the information presented in this video is provided solely for informational purposes and should not be used in place of consulting a professional. As questions you may have, we should always direct those to a qualified professional person. So who am I? So my name's Joe Arnold. I'm from Arnold & Baldwin Chartered Surveyors, a professional firm of surveyors based in London and the Southeast. I started the company around about 18 years ago. So I have lots of experience in residential property valuations and surveys and all sorts of intricacies. I also own a property development company, so I understand a lot about new builds. And I sit on the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors professional group panel, representing SME surveyors in the residential sector, in Jeremy Clarkson's voice, across the world. So I also help to write some of the residential home survey standards and some other projects at the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which is why I'm given the privilege to be able to interview Mr. Simon Rubinsohn. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Simon Rubinsohn.
Good morning, Joe. How are you doing?
How are you doing? You okay?
I'm well, thank you. You?
Yeah, very well, thank you. How's the tennis going? I know you're watching the tennis.
I had that in the background. Can't give all my trade secrets away. Sadly, Emma lost. So
Oh dear.
It's another bad day for the Brits.
There we go. So you've got some proper tea there. So what are you drinking in your cup of tea?
I mean, I'm an English breakfast man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, I'm a beekeeper, so I have honey in my tea from my bees in the garden. But it's decaf Twinings tea, so a little bit of luxury from home.
Yeah, sounds good.
Without the stimulus. So in our audience today, we've got many chartered surveyors, but we also have lots of estate agents, mortgage brokers, and solicitors, to name a few. So obviously, I know who you are, and lots of surveyors will. But please, may you let us know a little bit about who you are, set the scene, and explain what you do as the RICS Chief Economist.
Well, just very quickly, I mean, obviously, I've had a number of years working as a professional economist. You can see from the lack of hair on my head there that I've been around for quite a long period of time. Much of my career was working in financial services, and I moved over to the RICS. I think it was around 2005-06, and have since spent almost 20 years then at the institution, and have really been overseeing the work around market surveys, not just the residential sector, with the commercial sector and construction also feature very highly in the work that we do. Alongside the surveys that we run, I'm also involved very much in doing other sort of areas of research, thought leadership, working with senior executives at RICS in terms of broader strategy as well. So there's a lot of internal stuff, obviously also a lot of external stuff with stakeholders, whether it is the media, whether it is policy makers like the Bank of England, the Treasury, and international organizations like the IMF, using a lot of the material that I get from RICS members like yourself, Joe, and many others hopefully on the call.
Fantastic. One thing I always like to know is, how did you land the role? You see people with these great jobs, and I always wonder, how did you land the role? Are you able to maybe just share a little bit about how you got into the space?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I had spent quite a lot of time working in financial services, and I wanted to do something very different, actually. And this job did come up. I didn't know actually the previous incumbent vaguely, but the job did come up, and I thought this sounded like a really interesting role, having been, very much focused on financial assets and in a way perhaps slightly less tangible assets. So this seemed interesting both because of the physicality of the nature of the product, but also because of I think the really interesting role that RICS plays in sort of principally in terms of not just gathering in relatively important insights, but that role as sort of almost the sort of the overarching body that has sort of the interest of the property sector really in its core, and the way that public interest remit as well overlaid against sort of the broader functions of the institution.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. That's why I love being a surveyor myself. It's you never get a dull day. It's always you're out and about.
No.
You're able to go and look at buildings, be out in the fresh air or the rain or the snow, depending on what the weather is doing. Obviously, getting to meet people, collecting keys, saying hello to estate agents, vendors in their homes, finding out where they're moving to, or maybe it's an investor that's building a portfolio and listening to what their strategy is. Developers rebuilding, refurbishing, listening to their game plan. It's really interesting that you get such a deep insight into people's lives and strategies, and seeing how they make their living. So I love working in property. So we're here obviously today to talk about the RICS residential survey, which has just gone live. So please can you just explain to the audience what the residential survey is and how the data is compiled and why it is so important?
Look, at the end, no, the survey is essentially a sentiment survey, and we're always really open about that. It is not meant to be a replacement for the hard data that already exists that's being produced, whether it officially by the ONS. Data came out yesterday, or by the likes of Nationwide, Zoopla, or any other organization. It is sentiment. But what is quite remarkable is that the insight, the feedback that we get from respondents, RICS members, has shown over time to be a remarkably good lead indicator of how the hard data will turn out, whether it's to do with pricing or activity. And that's what makes this role so exciting, in a way, that interacting with people who are working as professionals on the ground, feeding into this survey, just their gut feel in many cases, gives us that quality of insight. And that insight, as I mentioned earlier, is really picked up on by so many stakeholders, not just in the UK, but around the world, because they view the results of this survey as being such a significant guide to what's going to happen in the UK residential sector.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I really like to read the comments as well, because it breaks down region by region what's happening on the ground. You can see the experts that have fed the information into the survey, so you can see what's going on in certain parts of the country that maybe, for example, I'm based in London, so I know what's going on in London in the southeast. I'm from Wales, so I can read what's happening in the Welsh market from our colleagues that feed in. So it really gives a good broad spectrum of advice of what's actually happening in the ground. But also, I think that the one thing that resonated with me last time we spoke is how those comments that members are feeding into the survey are so important to the likes of the Bank of England when they're assessing interest rates, to be able to listen to what's actually happening in the wider market on a monthly basis, which they don't have that sentiment anywhere else. So I think you were saying that it's the only sentiment survey that's really available to the likes of IMF and Bank of England. Is that right?
Well, I've had conversations with Bank of England officials who say that they clearly look at the headline numbers that are produced through this survey, but they always spend some time going through the comments, because while they do interact with businesses and professionals through a number of different channels, there are agents who are going out there talking to people in industry all the time. But the uniqueness of this survey is it's high frequency, it's monthly, many repeat respondents putting in comments so that they are able to really see on a month by month basis how the mood of respondents is changing. So they always do go through those comments. So, really important to have a look through them. And we know that there are going to be different views taken by different respondents. That's the nature of a market. But as they go through them, they will be getting a feel for where the market is and what the big issues are. And that's certainly a message that always comes back to me from the Bank of England in particular.
I remember my first employer, he told me that, you should really fill out this survey because you're getting your name in front of people that wouldn't ordinarily be able to see your name. So by filling out the comments and letting them know what's happening, you're able to get in front of the likes of the Bank of England, or maybe people inside other lending institutions that are reading through the document. Or it may well be, excuse me, as I pointed out earlier on about Wales, if you have put in a comment about what's happening in the Welsh property market, and there is an investor that's looking to purchase something in the local market, they will find you. And someone actually found me because I put something in about what's happening in the market. And I mentioned Croydon at the time because Westfield were supposedly coming to Croydon. And I had an American client come to me who was looking at purchasing one of the office blocks there to turn it into residential accommodation. I didn't win the instruction, but at least I had a hand in it and had the potential opportunity. So it just shows that by filling it in, that you never know what may come of it, but you're elevating yourself as a professional to be able to add that in there. So
is a market. I would add that there is definitely a marketing side to it because whether it is the local or the national media, and particularly the local, but more recently a lot of nationals as well, they will cite particular comments and particular individuals who have made those comments. So there is that side to things as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so in the market, obviously, we've seen this week that Knight Frank have swung from a minus 3% house price growth for 2024 to a plus 4% swing. And I know that I was watching Savills, and Lucian said that they obviously have minus 3% for this year as well, but hadn't appreciated the mortgage interest rate sort of war that we're seeing. I also saw that the Bank of Ireland have increased the proc fee that they're paying to mortgage brokers as well to try to entice them into sending more work over. And so I think Lucian was saying maybe they've undercooked it a little bit at minus 3%. One question I have is that sometimes people say to me, these sentiment surveys or predictions, they're a waste of time. You never know what's going to happen. I don't agree with that myself because I feel as though everybody needs to have some barometer for where the market is going. Do you have any views?
Well, look, I mean, I think that, there's, the nature of markets is that the mood is going to change, and, that's a given. So, people's views will change because the macroeconomic situation will change, interest rate expectations will change, and other dynamics impact the market will change. That said, one needs certain rudders, one needs parameters to work within. If you're a business and you're planning, you can't plan in a vacuum. You do need to have some basic assumptions. And I think that, whether it is the Knight Frank and Savills of this world, or indeed the RICS survey, when it comes to the residential sector, they help to provide some guidance. People will change their views, and no one should be overly criticized for making a change of view as the facts change, to quote one of the legendary economists of our generation, John Maynard Keynes. The RICS survey, which captures members' feedback, has been shifting. And if you look at the one that was the survey that's just been released, you can see that. So, the price balance is actually still negative. It's still negative. That's the current price balance, looking slightly backwards. But it's its best read since autumn 2022. So there is a shift underway, and that's our members' feedback is shifting as well. So it's not just the Knight Franks and the Savills, and buyer inquiries are now an R indicator. And I take on board that people on the ground are seeing activity pick up, but our seasonally adjusted metric is flat. But let's put that in the context. That's the best reading since spring 2022. So things are going on in the market and they're changing. And I think you made the point rightly that the way that the mortgage rates have begun to shift has probably been quite influential in explaining sort of the moves from Knight Frank, Savills, and indeed the RICS survey. But interestingly, and I think this is an interesting area for discussion. Yesterday, you will have seen Christine Lagarde, probably from the ECB, making her comments. The IMF made similar comments, basically saying, don't bet on interest rates coming down too fast. And they weren't talking about the UK specifically. It was more of a global comment. But we know that interest rate expectations have shifted dramatically. Go back 3 months, the expectation is we might see one cut in 2024. The market suddenly jumped to expecting 5 or 6 cuts. The bond market ran, swap rates came down, hence mortgage rates have begun to come down. But yesterday there was a reversal. Gilts lost or moved higher by about 20 basis points on yield, and money markets edged up. Now, that isn't to say that this optimism about mortgage rates isn't still warranted, but we're living in quite a volatile environment, and inflation may not come down in quite the way that is hoped for. We saw earlier this week a slight blip up in inflation, and if that were to materialize, some of the expectations around interest rates could dissipate. So people are moving around their numbers at the moment, but I don't think we've seen the end of this discussion. It's going to continue over the coming months as people try and get a better handle on the interest rate outlook and what that means for mortgage rates.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the mortgage products that are available right now, they look like they have very good deals. And if you're looking to buy somewhere, you can't tell what's going to happen. There's obviously some great mortgage brokers who are in our audience right now that will have a view and probably jumping up and down. Throw us a comment. Let us see what your thoughts are. But yeah, I think that the rates are very low, and it's a good time to buy. But obviously, like you're saying, inflation has crept up a bit. I can't see interest rates sort of dropping down fast because they need to try to get inflation under control. And 4% inflation, price of things is still going up. It may be inflation may be coming down, but the reality is the price of everything is still going up. Anyway, without further ado, should we jump onto the residential market survey? I'll share it in the screen so people can see. And maybe you can just drive us through some of the highlights that you've seen this month.
Yeah, just very quickly. Well, I mentioned just before, the price balance itself, which is the one that sort of tends to get a lot of PR, the publicity, that was still negative. But as I say, we're talking about the best figure in about 15 months. Last year was clearly very challenging, and while the actual fall in prices, peak to trough, hasn't been particularly large in a historical context, it was nevertheless quite a difficult year in terms of pricing last year. Now, we are seeing perhaps a little bit more positivity when it comes to some of the activity-based indicators. If you look at the buyer inquiry series, again, I mentioned that, or even the agreed sales numbers, they're also sending out more positive signals. The agreed sales net balance, and we do these things in sentiment, as part of a sentiment exercise, and they're net balance numbers rather than actual levels of activity. But the read there is actually the best one since the early part of 2022. So there are some really encouraging signs coming through, and I think that whole mortgage piece explains some of this. There's 2 other points I want to make about the survey. First of all, the 12-month expectations numbers, because I think it is all we all know that this is a bit of guesswork, but I'd rather use you guys, our members, to do that guesswork rather than a quantitative or econometric model which relies on assumptions which are going to change anyway. And I think that history has shown that people in the profession are better able to give me that long-term view or longer-term view than me playing around with some numbers and a model. we're being told at the moment that prices probably won't change that much over the next 12 months. So slightly more cautious actually than Knight Frank at the moment, but I'm happy to believe that. But there is more positivity about sales. So quite a strong read on sales. Now, sales took a bigger hit over the during the downturn than prices did. So perhaps expectations that we will see a rebound in activity is perhaps more well grounded, and I think probably more important for the market. We know the affordability issue is a big challenge in many parts of the UK. So actually seeing activity recover without prices running ahead isn't actually a bad outcome, I would suggest. Others might disagree, but I would suggest that would be quite a good outcome. Finally, I wanted to say one other thing, and about the lettings market. I know there's been a lot of discussion about obviously just how far rents have risen over the past short while. And some people saying, we're reaching that breaking point in terms of affordability. The feedback we're getting is that demand still outstripping supply in many parts of the country. And that while rental growth won't be on the scale it has been, rents are still likely to creep upwards over the coming year, simply because there just isn't enough stock out there. And, that's just, a reality of that market at the moment. So those, I think, are the main points, Joe.
Yeah, I think that for landlords, lots of landlords cashing in, aren't they, really? Sort of EPC requirements, sort of having to invest back into the property. Their interest rates have gone up. Their mortgage repayments have gone up. The electric bills, council tax bills, when they're vacant, whatever it may be, have all gone up. You've got second home increasing levies now. They're not making life easy for the landlords, which in turn makes life very difficult for tenants as landlords sell up. It's a very, very difficult situation. I think I saw 9% rise in rents expected in 2024. And when you look at the proportion of someone's income that is being spent on their rent every month, it's very difficult to live, right?
No, it's a major challenge, and I think we need a real holistic review of how that rental market should operate, because it's clearly really badly broken at the moment.
Yeah, I think the taxation on landlords is another topic for another day. But for me, it's absolutely crazy when UK residents require accommodation and not everybody can buy or would want to buy. Yet the landlords are being penalised, and that's just being passed on to the tenants, unfortunately. So so the survey then obviously itself looks like most people have a little bit of trepidation around about this year. I'm not quite sure where the market is going to go, and I'm happy to throw in what I think is going to happen this year first, unless you want to.
No, I'm really keen to hear your views.
Well, I did a little podcast at the beginning of the year before interest rates started to change, and I thought then that I couldn't see a -5% like some of the headlines were suggesting. I thought that was absolutely absurd, and I thought that it would flatline through it this year. I thought that you would have the normal seasonal peaks and troughs. We'll have a little bit of a flurry of activity, obviously in spring, which sets house prices off. We'll probably have a general election, which will slow things down. There'll be a stall, but usually whoever gets in, you spin out the other side. So I kind of felt like flatline. But interest rates, obviously where they are, makes me feel that maybe I was a little bit pessimistic. But you just never know what's going to happen in the news tomorrow. We've got everything that's going on in the Red Sea at the moment, and so for me, I'm gonna stick with a. It would be nice if we can get through this year with house prices remaining the same and for activity to pick up.
Well, I would take my lead and my steer from our respondents, which is pretty much what they're saying. Pretty flat on prices. There may be some regional variations, and obviously, depending on houses, flats. But pretty flat overall. But activity picking up, having taken quite a big hit. And I say, for me, that actually isn't the worst outcome. I mean, I think given affordability issues, seeing activity begin to recover, people being able to do what they want, so people being able to move, some sort of normality returning to the housing market. In that sense, I think that's really important. If we can see that this year, I think that's a good outcome.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. So obviously, respondents will be. Well, I suppose before I move on to that section, I just wanted to say how busy it actually is in the market for a January. We're having our busiest January that we've had for a very, very long time. I was speaking to another surveyor who has a lot of inquiries that come in. He has sort of a national panel where they distribute work out throughout the UK, and he said he's 100% up on this time last January. So it is a hot market. I've been out looking at all sorts of properties, and it's not just one segment of the market. We're at a £17.5 million property in Knightsbridge, which is being purchased by a cash buyer. We've got people who are looking at the studio flats, the one-bedroom flats, all spectrums. It seems as though people have come to life. So the market is busy, so you can see why people would get carried away and think that house prices may potentially run on. But yeah, so obviously, thank you very much for feeding in today. The RICS sentiment survey, hopefully everyone can see how important it is and why it's good to get involved with. Who is it actually open to? Who does RICS want to fill out the survey? Is it just members, or can other people from, say, a mortgage market perspective, or maybe a large estate agency chain, who do they want to have feeding into the survey?
I mean, typically we would like it to reflect the feedback of RICS members, but you know, we would also welcome a broader range of respondents as well. It will go under the banner of the RICS survey, but you know, we are keen to get as many respondents as possible because we believe it is such a good way of gathering insight around the market. So the preference and is to focus on RICS members. But if you're involved with a large agency chain, or if you're involved in the mortgage side, we certainly want your insights as well.
Fantastic. And I think as well, for me as an RICS registered valuer, some of the questions in the survey do ask you how many properties do you have on the market, how many have you sold. So sometimes I wasn't too sure whether my input was needed or not. Is it because I don't have an estate agency side to my business? So for anybody else that has that similar misconception, your views as an RICS registered valuer are wanted. They are important. Simply skip those questions. We will be working on trying to just refresh that a little bit to signpost it a bit better. So the more that we can have feeding into the survey, the more relevant it is to everybody. So just a couple of two final questions for you, Simon. How do people go about filling out the survey, and typically when do they need to do it by?
Right. Well, I think actually probably the easiest way at the moment to get on the list is to send me an email, and I'll stick you on the list. I could put something in the chat here, but I think actually it might well get lost. So it might be easier just to send me an email on my RICS address, which is just S, and that's Rubinsohn there with the H, at rics.org, and I will put you on the list. The next survey will open within a few days' time, actually, because this one came out late because of Christmas. Normally the release date is the second Thursday of each month, and then there's like a week or two before the next survey opens. But if we can get your name, we'll stick you on the list. You will then get the questionnaire sent to you. I will also make sure you receive a copy of the survey or a link to the survey on day of release as well, so you're fully aware of when the surveys come out and the report itself. And look, if people want to have a conversation with me about any of the details of the report, very happy to do that as well.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, on behalf of myself and Simon and the RICS, obviously I don't work at the RICS. I get heavily involved and help them to steer their ship in the best way. And thank you very much to everybody that has obviously contributed to the survey over the years, and those that continue to do so. Please do continue to feed in, and that's us over. I've still got my cup of tea, though. It's not really a proper tea anymore, is it? It's a bit cold.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, for this. Great opportunity to showcase the survey, and let's do it again.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, have a fantastic day, and catch everybody soon. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.